The sea that night looked as though someone had dropped a handful of silver shillings into a cauldron of ink. Waves reared, collided, and folded back on themselves in near-perfect arcs, as if imitating clock hands that refused to decide which direction to spin. At the wobbling helm of the courier sloop Starling stood Ruach Nettleton, apprentice to the Royal Guild of Clockmakers, clutching a battered toolbox with one hand and a salt-splintered mast with the other. His cargo was an ordinary brass carriage clock, but the note that had summoned him across 3 oceans was anything but ordinary. Come to Turler Isle. Our time runs in circles, and the circles have cracked. A final swell smashed the keel, hurled Ruach into black foam, and scattered gears, mainsprings, and his precious clock into the hungry straits. Somewhere between drowning and delirium, he glimpsed, or thought he glimpsed, 3 colossal turtles spiraling beneath him, their shells inscribed with emerald whorls that flickered like constellations at the bottom of the world. When he crawled ashore, coughing out half the tide, the sun hung twice in the sky, one disk burning above the horizon, the other resting at the zenith like a reflection without a mirror. Roaring spat sand and muttered, "By all the mainsprings in His Majesty's cabinets, I've landed on the wrong side of midnight." An old woman watched him from a driftwood throne. Her hair was darker than dried kelp, but her pupils shimmered gold, and when she spoke the syllables unspooled in sets of 2, as if each phrase repeated quietly behind itself. "Storm-brought clock boy," she said, "you've arrived in the first ring of morning. Time here curls inward. Step carelessly, and you'll meet yesterday sooner than you wish." Ruach, having spent 16 years aligning escapements so that seconds behaved, resisted the urge to call the woman mad. "I am seeking the hermit called Haggard," he managed, teeth chattering. "He wrote me. I am his prelude," the woman answered with a second smile folded inside the first. "Walk with me until the moment wraps back, and he'll greet you." She rose, leaned on a staff carved to resemble a nautilus shell, and began trudging along the beach. Every few paces, Ruach saw her footprints blink out, replaced by earlier prints marching in reverse, and wondered if exhaustion was chewing holes in his vision. The island's interior resembled a clock face exploded into landscape. Ridges formed perfect arcs, rivers branched in logarithmic spirals, wind bent palm fronds into concentric hoops. In every clearing, stone statues of turtles sat frozen mid-turn, their marble carapaces etched with grooves that whirled toward invisible centers. Ruach's guide paused at one such statue, tapped her staff against its shell, and the air trembled like a plucked string. "Here rests Morgieb, eldest of the spiral turtles," she explained. "They keep the circles aligned, yet something struck Morgieb 3 sunsets ago, though the bruise landed many tomorrows hence, and now the rings wobble." As if on cue, the horizon snapped sideways. The lower sun blinked off. The higher sun groaned lower. The entire world performed an inaudible tick. Ruach staggered. "That's impossible," he whispered, but the words tasted small beside the evidence. Toolmakers, he reminded himself, solve impossibilities or rust. They climbed a corkscrew staircase of sandstone until they reached a hut whose walls were made of pendulum bobs strung like beads. Inside, dozens of clocks lay dismantled. Springs pooled like silver noodles, and in the middle sat a bent-back man studying a turtle hatchling whose shell spun slowly on its own. "Ruach," he said without turning, "I sent for you once, twice, and never. Luckily this time you answered. Haggard, I presume?" "Yes, though the island folk call me the Intermission." Haggard's eyes were sunken, but spark-bright. "Time on Turlo Isle is a staircase curled into itself," he began. "Each step is a ring. Usually the spiral turtles ferry the hours outward so that dawn follows dusk in neat loops. But Magoba Eldest Hand was struck by defiant lightning. His shell cracked. Gaps appeared in the flow, and certain moments escaped. Now some residents live yesterday, while their neighbors sprint toward next week. If tomorrow arrives before today concludes, The coil unravels. All of Turla will pour into the hollow where minutes don't exist. We'll vanish from history because history won't know when to write us, Ruark exhaled. What do you need from a half-drowned court mechanic? You are not half-drowned. You are precisely 2/3 drowned 5/8 of the time, Haggard said mildly. More important, you're the only visitor carrying a clock who hasn't had it devoured by the undertow of mismoments. Your escape wheel survived. He handed over the brass carriage clock, miraculously intact. And this wheel's rhythm can coax the circles back into harmony, provided someone surfs the currents, locates the broken moments, and stitches them home before tomorrow crosses the line of first arrival. Ruark stared at the miniature machine he'd built for a duchess's sickly cat. The cat loved the chime, and laughed despite himself. You expect me to ride time like a wave? Haggard opened a woven basket. Inside lay a narrow board, lacquered indigo, etched with silver spirals matching those on the marble turtles, crafted from shell flakes shed by Salacia, youngest guardian. The board will recognize the currents. Stand upon it, hold your clock high, and the rings will rise beneath you. Mend what you find. Return before the outermost ring completes 99 beats, or the edge of tomorrow will reach the core. Oh, and mind the underteller. The what? Don't worry yet. Everyone meets him at least once. That evening, as twin crescent moons orbited each other above the treetops, Ruark practiced. He balanced on the spiral board atop dune ridges, feeling grains shift like seconds through an hourglass. Haggard's prelude, whose name he learned was Leora, clicked her tongue approvingly. He listens to the hum, she whispered. That's how you steer. When the first false dawn painted lavender arcs across half the sky, they carried the board to a cliff overhanging the sea. Ruark strapped the brass clock to his chest, wound it, and waited. The water below shivered, peeled into luminous rings that circled a dark stillness at the center. Air smelled of cedar shavings and midwinter. Time had opened. Remember, Haggard called, voice flickering between echoes. The moment you leave the ledge, you'll slip out of sequence. Eat only fruit you find growing toward the future. Avoid shadows that run upstream, and if you encounter loops of your own footprints, keep the leftmost path. Above all, do not let the underteller bargain you down to 0. Before the clockmaker could ask what that meant, the cliff blurred. Instinct roared. He threw himself forward, and the rings rose to meet him. The sensation resembled skate gliding across an endless bell. Currents of turquoise light curved and swooped. Each carried kaleidoscopic shards, children chasing hoops, sailors furling sails, lovers quarrelling under eclipse. Some moments looked unfinished. People stuttered mid-gesture, colours inverted, then snapped back. Others resembled torn parchment edges, glowing where they'd ripped free. Ruark coasted along the outermost ring first, listening. The second hand inside his clock clacked at 62 beats per minute, slightly fast, compensating for drag. He reached a shred of time where a fisherman's net froze halfway over water. Droplets hung like crystal fruit. He touched the brass case to the ragged edge. Gears hummed, and the net completed its arc, splashing neatly. A ripple of applause from unseen banks accompanied the repair. One fracture sealed. He dove deeper, spirals tightening. The next wound lay in a market square. People moved both forward and backward. Laughter overlapped weeping. Stall awnings flipped between sunrise and dusk. Ruark hopped off the board, boots landing on cobblestones that clicked like dominoes. He knelt beside a toppled cart of figs, located the epicenter, a broken fig whose juices bled luminous script and fitted the tip of the minute hand into the fissure. The fig reassembled. The square snapped into a chord, the crowd cheering. A festival he would never witness. Hours or perhaps fractions of one passed thus. Every mend steadied the island's rotational rhythm. Yet each descent brought him closer to the core where currents bucked violently. Lines between rings blurred. Here, yesterday's dawn might barrel in sideways, smashing against tomorrow's dusk. While crossing a corridor of overlapping summers, Ruark saw himself 6 steps ahead, surfing an alternate spiral. His double glanced back, winked, and dissolved into starlight. "Keep left," Ruark muttered, recalling Haggard's warning, and veered. The board hissed over molten memories. At the 7th ring, he encountered living guardians. 3 spiral turtles, circling a wound so vast it resembled a thundercloud made of broken mirrors. Their shells spun, generating wind that smelled of ozone and nostalgia. Ruark hailed them in every language he knew. One, huge as a cathedral, rotated an amber eye toward him. The reflection inside that eye showed an hourglass with sand almost emptied. A soundless play. He guided the brass clock along the wound's perimeter, letting its balanced heartbeat broadcast steady measure. The cloud funneled inward, sealing with a sigh like a sail filling. The turtle trio drifted apart, satisfied. As Ruark pulled away, one extended a flipper, tipped with bioluminescent runes. A gift. A single scale, shaped like a tuning fork. He tucked it into his belt. The clock ticked truer, sensing reinforcement. Down, ever down he slid, until darkness replaced color, and currents grew sharp as razors. The board quaked. Ruark spotted a shoreline where no beach should be. Black sand, frozen waves, sky stitched from pages of unwritten diaries. Standing among stalagmites of calcified expectations was a thin man in a coat sewn from our hands. His face was featureless, save for a candlestick mouth that melted upward. "Greetings, uncounted one," said the man. Each word rang a different bell in Ruark's skull. "I am the Underteller, curator of subtractive reckonings. You have borrowed much continuity. Time demands amortization." Ruark swallowed. "I borrowed nothing. I'm mending leaks. A ledger's difference is lawyer's gossip. Every patch is still a patch. Cosmic cloth prefers holes to lies," the Underteller countered. "But I am generous. Yield your clock. Accept oblivion in installments. I shall index you at a respectable fraction." "No deal," Ruark said, voice steadier than his bones felt. "A pity. I'll collect when the ticks falter." The figure dissolved into dust that drifted backward, forming a corridor of negative silhouettes. Ruark hurried on, pulses drumming in his ears louder than any second hand. Approaching the innermost circle, he discovered the source of calamity. Gweb himself, colossal and trembling. The great turtle floated above a whirlpool of splintered instants, his cracked shell leaking hourglass sand glowing violet. Each grain that spilled became a frayed minute elsewhere, unbinding rhythms island-wide. Around him, time eddies flickered through epochs. Primordial seas collided with distant futures where iron forests creaked. Ruark kicked into freefall, bald skimming perilously close to singular entropy. He needed to seal the crack. But Muhab's shell was larger than a cathedral roof. His toolbox held only mortal-sized parts. He remembered the scale gifted earlier. He pulled it free. The tuning fork shape vibrated, emitting a tone deeper than silence. Ruark set the brass clock atop the scale. Its gears clicked, aligning with the resonance, minute hand whirring until it pointed true north toward the frac. He maneuvered alongside MOHO. The turtle's breathing thundered like tides. "May?" Ruark murmured. Mugheb's eye, an ocean unto itself, blinked acceptance. First, he lodged the tuning fork's scale across the widest split, striking it lightly with a mainspring barrel. The scale glowed, welding flesh shell to eternity. Still, sand bled through hairline fissures. Ruark, thinking furiously, detached the balance wheel from his pocket watch, a spare he'd brought for parts, and pressed it over the second gap. The oscillation synchronized with the turtle's heartbeat. Sand ceased flowing there too. Yet the final and narrowest crack pulsed like a dying pulse. In. out, losing tempo. Without a piece small enough, Ruark felt failure looming. The brass carriage clock hummed, almost eager. He understood. He unscrewed its crystal face, removed the second-hand delicate, reed-thin, minted from tempered spring steel, and wedged it into the last fissure like a dressmaker sliding a pin. He tightened a gear nut against its base. The hand's red tip quivered once, twice, then lay still. Then it began to revolve, regulating the turtle's very shell. Violet sand dammed, the whirlpool below calmed. The innermost ring brightened, currents reversed, carrying Ruark upward through tightening spirals that now spun stable. He felt tomorrow's edge withdrawing, giving today space to finish its sentence. The Underteller's silhouette corridor shattered into harmless dust motes. Yet balance demanded sacrifice. The carriage clock, stripped of its second hand, would never chime again. Its innards had fused with guardian flesh. Ruark held the now hollow case and grinned. A noble retirement for a desk ornament. Emerging onto an upper ring, he paused to gaze back. Mosel glowed like a lighthouse, radiating concentric ripples that restacked hours properly. The sea of broken moments folded itself flat, smoothing wrinkles until only faint scars remained, reminders rather than rips. When he finally burst through the surf at Turlov's shore, the sun stood single and sane. Haggard, Leora and a gathering of villagers waited beside driftwood bonfires that neither crackled too slowly nor flared too fast. They cheered so loudly even the gulls wheeled off, startled. "Did tomorrow behave?" Ruark called, staggering onto sand. "It knows its place again," Haggard replied, clasping the clockmaker's calloused hands. "You return before the line of first arrival curved inward. Motjob is mended threefold," said Ruark. He offered the empty clock case. "I owe her Grace's cat an apology." Leora laughed, a sound like two intertwining melodies. "The cat will chase untethered ribbons of late afternoon for decades. It won't miss your chime." That night the island feasted. Fiddles and conch horns wove tunes conducted by steady moonrise. Ruark learnt that each spiral turtle governed a season of the island's time. Salacia, the surging spring, Rion, the lantern summer, Volkar, the ember fall, and Miob, Oraba, winter, the keeper of rest. When one faltered, seasonal hours faltered too. Without correction, birds might lay eggs before building nests, crops sprout before seeds, deaths precede births. Ruark listened, eating sea salt bread spiced with future cinnamon, and felt gratitude balloon inside him. He had repaired clocks before, but never the living kind, never one whose escapement measured histories. At festival's height, Leora drew him aside. "The currents still know your tread," she said. "Should you wish the turtles welcome a steward walking upright?" For a moment, temptation glittered. Surfing time, balancing universes. Was that not a vocation beyond palace corridors? Yet Ruark also pictured the mainland, apprentices awaiting lessons, small-town towers chiming poorly, gears begging grease. "Our folk have guardians," he said gently. "The capital has only clock doctors with dull tools. I'll remember your spirals, though." He touched the empty clock case hanging at his hip. "And carry your seconds in mine." Before dawn, Hagar escorted him to a cove where the starling, somehow refitted, bobbed in mild surf. "She paired herself 3 rings ago," the hermit explained. "Time owed you interest." He handed Ruark a rolled parchment. "Should the world not again, this map will show you the nearest circle." They clasped arms. Leora pressed a palm to Ruark's cheek, leaving a faint spiral of phosphorescence that would fade only when he forgot the island's hum. He promised to write, even if letters travelled slower than memories. As the sloop's sails caught faithful wind, Ruark glanced back once. 4 vast shadows cruised beneath shallow waters, carving circles that overlapped like petals of a turning flower. The island's coastline gleamed with sunrise, riding in proper order, first blush, then bloom. He opened his toolbox and added 2 relics. the tuning fork scale's twin prong, and the smallest gear left from the carriage clock, a coin-sized ring of brass. Neither ticked, yet together they whispered a rhythm older than calendars, a rhythm he would teach apprentices, kings, cats, anyone with ears. Far astern, time flowed in concentric circles, governed by spiral turtles who dreamed of seasons arriving precisely when hope required. On deck, a tempest-tossed clockmaker charted new courses, certain now that tomorrow would never dare arrive first so long as someone listened for cracks and carried a steady heartbeat into the breach.